Okay, hey, what's up, everybody? Pastor Matt here. First of all, let me apologize for the quality of this video. I'm using my Chromebook today and not my phone to record. I should probably, at some point, look into getting some more quality video and audio recording equipment if my YouTube page is going to grow. Thank you, though, because today marks the 3,000th subscriber I have to this page. My light just went out. 3,000th subscriber to this YouTube channel, which I'm very excited for. That's very cool. That means there's some people out there like me that like the stuff I talk about, including books, Bibles especially, and short chats on theology, especially from a Reformed perspective. So that's me, that's this channel. Thanks for choosing to watch today. I want to address a question that I hear often enough that I figured I finally should just go ahead and answer it. In the comments of my videos, I receive various questions from time to time, and a lot of them I try to answer in my replies. Others I just kind of write down for another day of video recording, and still others I feel that I should address directly. This question has to do with what is the difference between the various kinds of Presbyterianism. A lot of those questions come to me from my video, Why I Am a Presbyterian, which hopefully you might take a few moments just to check out. But I do get that question from time to time, what are the differences between the various stripes of Presbyterianism? And let me just go ahead and try to answer that to the best I can. First of all, let's define what a Presbyterian church is. I'm not going to argue for it here over against other various denominations and traditions. But let me just define a Presbyterian church generally as a church that is organized with the elder-led board, or often that's called the session. In fact, the Greek word Presbyterian means elders, and so a Presbyterian church by definition is one that has elders in its leadership. Now that would be as over against churches that are congregational in form, where the congregation essentially votes on everything, including who's hired, who's fired, all that kind of stuff can be voted on. And as over against a church that would be hierarchical in structure, like an Episcopalian church or a Roman Catholic church, where you have a series of bishops, archbishops, cardinals, etc., going all the way up to the top. A Presbyterian church is a church that is elder-led, and not only that, but organizes itself in geographic presbyteries. So that would be an area in which different churches associate with one another through a shared ecclesiology and doctrine. So while some churches may be elder-led, like Baptist churches, they might not be fully Presbyterian in that we are also connectional, working together in regional bodies called presbyteries. So Presbyterian churches traditionally, of course, have been of the Reformed movement, and going back to church history, in the Protestant Reformation, you had several big strains of reforming churches. You, of course, had the Lutheran branch led by Martin Luther. You had the Anglican branch in the Kingdom of England. And then the Reformed churches tended to be of Swiss or Dutch or Scotch persuasion, including influencing theologians like John Calvin, Ulrich Zwingli, and John Knox in Presbyterian Scotland. So there's a little bit of background. Now today, what I'm going to try to do is define a couple of the differences between the mainline PCUSA church here in America and some of the other more conservative bodies of which I am a part. Now to do that, I'm going to exclude by necessity some of the other Presbyterian churches from around the world. So I have no intention of talking about for instance, what's going on in Scotland today, or the Presbyterian Church of Ireland or Canada. We'll have to leave those for another discussion. But here in America, you have several main bodies of Presbyterian churches, the largest of which is the PCUSA. That is the Presbyterian Church of the United States of America. That's the largest Presbyterian body, and it is also the most liberal body, which is why I could personally not be a part of it. The Presbyterian Church USA is almost as extremely liberal as you can possibly get for a mainline denomination. And while they do have a solid history with the Reformed confessions, including the Westminster Confession of Faith, the PCUSA, as a monolithic organization, has tended towards decline for about a century into full-blown liberalism that it has today. So if you were to see a Presbyterian church, Anywhere in your block or your city, there's a good chance that that church is part of the PCUSA and therefore is of the most liberal mainline denomination because they have the most in terms of number of sheer churches. So you think of a Presbyterian church, there's a good chance it's PCUSA. Not only that, but the PCUSA tends to be the darling of the liberal media. So if you hear reports about Presbyterians ordain homosexuals or transgender or this or that, it's probably a PCUSA church because they tend to be extremely liberal, not only in their theology, but their politics as well. Again, which is why I personally could not be a part of a PCUSA church. The PCUSA endorses homosexuality, transgenderism. It seems to be anti-Israel in many senses. The PCUSA has had several attempts to divest resources from Israel in favor of the Palestinians. So much that I can't even really get into it because, to be honest, in some ways it sort of sickens my stomach. And so when people associate my body with the PCUSA or confuse them, I always find that to be sort of a disturbing thing because of how much theological decline the PCUSA has suffered over the past 100 years. Now, go back in time, and of course, that mainline body had several splits and rejoinders together, and there are certainly some faithful in the PCUSA today. I don't mean to denigrate all of those bodies, all the persons in those local churches. However, as a national body, the PCUSA has strayed so far from historic Orthodox evangelical Christianity that in some senses it's unrecognizable as a Protestant movement. Okay, so be careful with the PCUSA because if you see them in the newspaper or hear about them on the news, Presbyterians did something wacko or crazy, it's probably a PCUSA church. Okay, now let's go to the body of which I'm a part, and then I'll talk about a few others after that. I'm a part of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, the EPC. Now, we would have to move one significant step to the right to understand the EPC. We are a denomination of about 600 churches. We've grown dramatically in the last 10 years or so. When I was ordained, there was 180 EPC churches. Now today, there's about 600. Much of that growth comes from churches that are disaffected by the PCUSA's liberalism, wanting intentionally to move to the right towards our group, the EPC. We came out of the mainline body in the early 1980s, and our church, unlike the PCUSA, is a uni-confessional church, or a mono-confessional church, to coin a term, meaning we only have one confession of faith, which is the Westminster Confession of Faith. The PCUSA, by distinction, as a multi-confessional church, they have all kinds of confessions. I think there's a dozen or more. Some of them are historically reformed, like the Heidelberg Catechism. Others are more intentionally liberal, and it gets kind of weird from there. So the EPC has only one confession. It's the Westminster Confession of Faith, which, by the way, is the historic practice of Presbyterian churches. By and large, we have only been Westminster subscribing churches throughout history, but the PCUSA kind of got weird with adopting multiple confessions, which is very confusing and probably intentionally so. In effect, the laity studying those confessions far less, and of course that contributed to the drift of the Presbyterian churches over those 100 years. So the EPC is part of, well, they broke away completely from the PCUSA, have no fraternal relationship at this point with the PCUSA. Our churches tend to be very conservative. We tend to be very strong on issues of gender and marriage. Of course, we believe that marriage is only between one man and one woman. We've made several statements in regard to defending the traditional view of marriage, and so from that perspective, I'm very proud to be part of the EPC's stance on marriage. We highly value church planting. We highly value global missions, especially in the Muslim world. The EPC, from its very get-go, has intentionally tried to steer almost all of our missionary resources towards engaging and evangelizing the Muslim world. So again, I think that's something to be commended. One carryover from the PCUSA that is sort of still flowing through our bloodstream is that the EPC does allow the ordination of women in all offices. So that would include teaching elders or pastors, that would include ruling elders, and that would include the diaconate. And so that's one carryover from the PCUSA's ethos that we've adopted into our body from the early 80s. Now, I will stop right here and answer another question that is asked of me. What is my view on women in ministry? And in this regard, I would be even more conservative than my own denomination at this point, because I'm one of a smaller minority of EPC pastors that are complementarian, meaning that I believe that the offices of pastor, elder, and deacon are reserved for men in Scripture. And perhaps another video, I could define exactly why that's so. Personally, I think it's very clear in the Scriptures that that is the historic, biblical, and orthodox position. But nevertheless, I disagree with many of my EPC cohorts on that particular matter. One more thing sets us apart, and that is that the EPC has historically been a little bit more open to charismatic expression. We're not a Pentecostal denomination by any stretch. I wouldn't even necessarily describe us as charismatic, but we do have some churches in our union, the EPC, that do have some sort of charismatic leanings to them, although we fall short of being a charismatic or a Pentecostal denomination. Okay, so 600 churches, a dozen or so presbyteries, I forget the number right now, regionally affiliated churches. We get together, we meet at presbytery meetings a couple times a year, and then we meet together for General Assembly once in the summer. Okay, so that's the EPC. Now let's move even further to the right and then talk about the PCA. If I wasn't in the EPC, I would probably be in the PCA because I fit there very well theologically, including the one major difference between the EPC and the PCA, which is that the PCA does not have female pastors or elders, although female deacons are discussed in the PCA, but they would be a by and large complementarian denomination by definition, since they don't ordain women to the office of pastor or elder. I would fit very well there in the PCA, and if I was an EPC, perhaps one day I would be PCA or will be PCA, who knows. But right now I serve an EPC church. The PCA is very confessional. It's very strictly moored to the Westminster Confession of Faith, as is the EPC. I think they have a slightly stronger view on subscription to the Westminster Confession of Faith. And as far as the ethos of their churches and presbyteries go, I think the PCA has the Westminster Confession in more of those conversations intentionally. So they tend to be more self-awaredly reformed and confessional in their ethos. PCA has about 2,000 churches, if I'm not mistaken, so it would be larger than the EPC, but smaller than the PCUSA. And by my estimates, is a very solid, reformed, historically confessional and orthodox denomination. I would be proud to be part of the PCA. We can go even further to the right then and talk about some other smaller denominations, the OPC, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, and the RPCNA, the Reformed Presbyterian Church in North America. Here you would get smaller in terms of church size and denominational size, and you'd get even more conservative, not in terms of orthodoxy or doctrine, but in terms of practice. In the OPC and the RPCNA, you would see a much more psalm singing, as over against praise songs, certainly, and possibly even hymns as well. And the worship services would probably comport even more so with a stricter view of the regulative principle of worship and traditional reformed liturgies. Okay, so there's a basic outline of several of the Presbyterian denominations in America. I'm part of the EPC. That would be a conservative denomination, but somewhat centrist as far as views on women go, although I myself am complementarian. The ARP is another solid, historical, smaller denomination, very similar to the PCA. But could I ever be a part of a PCUSA church? No, at this point I doubt that I would have any interest in that. I don't think that would fit me very well at all. Maybe it fits you. Maybe that's cool with you. Maybe you are more politically liberal if you find yourself agreeing with the Democratic Party on most of their moral platform. You'd probably be fit naturally in the PCUSA. If you tend to be much more conservative on some of those moral issues, then probably the EPC, the PCA, or some of the others that I've mentioned would be a good fit for you. All right, well, I hope that's a good overview of Presbyterian bodies in the United States. Again, it's not an exhaustive overview, but may be helpful for you. All right, if you're interested in any of these denominations, I'd say spend some time on Wikipedia or spend some time on the denominational websites of each one of those. I do commend to you the EPC. We're a solid, even though I think we're in error on women's roles. I also commend to you the PCA, the ARP, the OPC, and the RPCNA as faithful, reformed, biblical, historical, orthodox, confessional witnesses to the faith once and for all handed down to the saints. All right, thanks for checking in. Love you lots. If you're interested, please subscribe to this channel. If not, no big deal. Man, there's just so much good stuff on the interweb, and a lot of it's a lot better than mine. But thanks for checking in today. Again, I apologize for the quality of the video. This Chromebook does not have the best camera there is, but hopefully the audio came through this time. All right, love you lots. Talk to you later, man. Bye-bye.